I'll put my lecturer voice on and I'll get really cross. Especially seeing as I've been teaching all day today. I've about had enough of lecturing today. So for those who don't know me, I'm obviously Melissa Jackson. I am the person who was turn off the lights. So I'm also the silly secretary of the Cactus and Succulent Society. And so I also very stupidly, for some reason, dobbed myself in to do this talk. And when I originally dobbed myself into it, I was going to do it in February, and then Stefan, who was scheduled to speak in the April slot, couldn't do April. And I said, oh, I'll swap. And so then, of course, I went, oh, I've got months now to do that talk. And I ended up like sitting down and doing it last night, which I'm terrible at doing that. If I give myself too big a window of opportunity to do things, I always leave it to the last minute. So I do apologise in advance that this has been sort of thrown together fairly quickly. You'll also note by the name of my talk, Adventuring in Argentina to See the Andes and Cacti. So yes, there will be photos of cacti, but I am not really a cacti grower. I don't have a lot of cacti in my collection. Most of my plants are succulents, primarily African, South African based succulents, Haworthias, Gasterias, Mesems. So my primary purpose for going to Argentina and Chile, the tour I actually did was Argentina and Chile, was to actually really see the Andes. And I was like, what better way to do it than on a cactus tour, because at least then you're traveling with sort of like-minded people. So I did the trip in November 2019. It was 16 days. I'm only going to cover up to day 8, which was about the point in time where we left Tilcara, and we would then cross over the border through the Atacama Desert into Chile. So we then sort of traveled down through Chile, back over the border and back into Argentina, but I'm not going to do those sort of later days just because of time-wise. So just the first 8 days of my my trip in Argentina. So started in the beautiful city of Cordoba, and if you love a city that's a beautiful blend of modern and old, Cordoba is just absolutely gorgeous. I particularly love old architecture like that, and it has a number of really beautiful churches and areas where it's got these lovely canals that are sort of covered by trees. It was a really gorgeous city. I really quite liked it. And even walking around in the city on my own, I felt quite safe. Probably the biggest issue is that I speak absolutely no Spanish. So it was rather fun trying to communicate. I went to a market, I bought some earrings. The guy that I bought the earrings off spoke some English. And he's like, you have to barter. I'm like, no, just take the money. And so he's like, no, you're at a market, you have to barter. So I was like, okay. So I get to the next seller that I wanted to buy something off. And so I'm trying to barter, and she didn't speak any English and I didn't speak any Spanish. And a guy who had actually been talking to me, who was another person shopping who spoke some English, was walking past, and I went, oh, can you please help me? I want to buy this. I need to know how much. And so he translated for me, and I think it worked out at about $2.50 Australian. And so I said, oh, I'm going to do the barter thing. I'll go $2. And she's like, no, $2.50. I'm like, no, $2. And she's like, no, $2.50. And I went, oh, okay. And because like $2.50, seriously. And so I looked in my wallet and I didn't have change. So I handed her what was probably the equivalent of $5, and she went, thank you very much, and put it in her wallet and handed me the item. So not only am I terrible at bartering, I actually don't get a discount and I pay more for things. So this is why I now no longer try to barter at all. I was always bad at it, but I just get worse. So even despite that experience in Cordoba, I still absolutely loved it. It's a beautiful city. Oop. So on the first day, Guillermo always likes you to sort of get into town early, and it's quite nice. Everybody sits down together in the group and has a lovely meal before we start ridiculously early the next morning. So we headed out of Cordoba to the town of Dean Funes, and not very far out of the city of Cordoba, we made our first stop. And I must admit, being a non-cactus grower, this was not the kind of area where I expected we would be looking for cactus. I was like, you know, this is grass and shrubs, and yes, there's some rocks, but we saw some perodia at that site. There were also some terrestrial orchids growing, which was great. I took some photos of those and sent them to my mother and said, name these for me, please, because my mother's an orchid grower. And some Gymnocalycium brucei. This was the only plant that I actually found in habitat before anybody else on the first day, and I was like, woohoo! And these are really small, like really small, about the size of a walnut. So I was very impressed with myself. And then after that, yes, I found stuff, but it all tended to be really big that Blind Freddie would run into. So it was sort of like beginner's luck on the first day, and then it all went downhill from there. So we then moved on to more sort of pastoral type land, and there were signs that livestock had been grazing in this area, and we saw some Gymnocalycium andreae. These are quite common in collections. Back when I did try and sort of grow a few cactus, I had some gymnos, and this was one of the ones that I had in my collection. We were lucky, a lot of the stuff that we saw was also in flower or had nice big seed pods on it. We also saw at this site some Gymnocalycium monvillei, and these were really big specimens. This would have been close to the size of a basketball. It was a huge, big specimen. And this lovely rock lizard that actually was that shade of green. That is not photoshopping. And he quite promptly, I managed to very quickly snap the photo, and he ran away. And then I was sort of wandering around, and I heard this noise, and I turned around, and he was looking at me from out of this little rock crevice, or it could have been a different one, I don't know. But I'd like to think it was the same one that I'd seen earlier. And so a little bit further down the road, and a lot of the stops, sometimes you'll just be driving along and it's like, you know, brakes on because somebody spotted something flowering out the window. And so we stopped at this sort of cutting, and everyone was sort of like looking up at this cutting. And I mean, this cutting would have been, you know, the height of the ceiling in here. And if you look really closely, there's a couple of little white sort of dots there, and that was the plant that somebody had sort of spotted flowering. But we walked along the road a little bit, and were able to actually get up on the top of that cutting, and there were loads and loads and loads of them, just in masses of flowers everywhere. And it was a really, really beautiful sight. One of the nicest gymnos I think I saw while I was away. But again, you know, long grass, growing in long grass. And that, you know, that's not where cactus grow. I was so surprised to see this, and it was so not what I expected to see. Our next stop was at this beautiful dam. This is not a natural lake. It is an actual dam for water reservoir, I believe. Some local bird life. Did see quite a lot of different birds, managed to snap a few pictures, but I like birds. I like to photograph them if I see them, but I'm not enough of a birder to then want to be able to name them all. And of course, the other thing that you see very frequently if you go on any kind of plant tour is people walking around like this. Yes. Yes, and you get very good at walking around like this and not running into things or falling over things, although I did manage to fall over twice. Once walking backwards and didn't realise there was a great big hole behind me and I fell in it, and once going down a hill, despite the fact that I knew the gravel was really loose, I still managed to have a little bit of a slip and fall. But you spend a lot of time sort of, walking around looking at the ground. But we were looking here for a couple of different types of gymnocalcium. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. Capillaense, maybe. And moistii, which I believe there was a specimen of over on the table there this evening. And, you know, again, growing in long grass, this is the same plant down here underneath this shrub. So if you're not looking closely, when they're not in flower, you can often walk past them and you don't even realize that they're there. So having a group who's all looking, and if somebody spots one, everyone sort of gives a shout and rushes over and queues up to get photos, particularly if they're in flower. But some areas had more plants than others. A little bit further along the road, we did a, sorry about that. We did another quick sudden stop on the side of the road because somebody spotted this, a Puntia quemillo. And it was a massive plant and covered in quite a few flowers, as well as some seed pods starting to form. The next day we travelled from Dean Foons through to Tafí del Val, and very fortunate to see some cleistocactus in flower. Now this area that we were in, you don't kind of get a grasp from these pictures, but you get a better grasp from these pictures. Very, very shrubby. So as you were walking through, lots of very prickly, I think they're acacias. I should have known this, but you know, who wants to know about plants that aren't succulents? So you can see these really thorny branches that some bird has made its nest out of. It's kind of like, I'd hate to be a baby being hatched into that. I hope it's lined with something really fluffy, but what a great protective mechanism. And I saw quite a few of these nests around, and I was like, you know, this bird really smart, not just making the nest out of prickles, but making the nest in prickles. But these trees were vicious with these big thorns on them. So you were getting hooked on your clothes in the top and then walking through tephros and puntias and things around your ankles. So it was quite fun to sort of trudge through, but lots of interesting things to see, including these guys. I have no idea what kind of millipede these were, but I thought they were really cool and they were everywhere. And so when I wasn't trying to run into something prickly plant-wise that was trying to attack me, I was trying not to tread on these gorgeous little creatures because they were just so cute. I said before that we had seen some Apuntias. So this is probably one of the most common ones that you'll see in Argentina, Apuntia sulfurea, thusly named by the beautiful, lovely sulfur yellow flowers. Stetsonia corinne, these were quite large, obviously. But you also sort of saw a lot of younger plants. I thought this was really interesting. This is choa, so the cactus wood, where it's obviously had a very large part of it snap off here and fall over. But look at all the beautiful new growth that's sort of coming off of that, and it's flowering. And you can still see the some of the old wood growing behind. So it was nice to sort of see that even where there was some death, there was new life. And then a little bit further along, I was wandering and these little guys caught my eye. And so I got my camera out to take some pictures, and within just a few minutes, both beetles had disappeared inside of it and were in absolute pollen heaven, I reckon. And I stood there and I watched them wandering in and out of this one flower for about 10 minutes before somebody yelled at me that we were going back to the bus. So I'd have stood there and watched them all day, I reckon. So leaving that area, this is where it wasn't shrubs that were trying to attack you. This is what it was like, grassland. So we sort of got back on the bus, and 50 metres up the road there were these goats from the local farm grazing on the road. And a little bit further up, it sort of started turning into these salt flats and salt pans with just these shrubby bushes. And then not far after that, we made our next stop, and we were looking for Gymnocalycium raganesii, or raganesii, I suppose, depends upon how you pronounce it, the lovely little brown one that's barely got any spines on it at all. I swear this place was like hell on earth. It was so hot. It was just, it felt like the heat was from the sun was reflecting off everything. It doesn't look hot in these pictures, but it was hot. It was really hot. And the ground was really sort of quite dusty. It was very easy walking around, and you could see lots of, you know, areas to walk around. We spent, I think it was about 2 hours there looking for this Gymnocalycium and couldn't find any. Unfortunately, there were signs, of course, of plants being taken from habitat. We did see that in a few sites, both in Argentina and Chile, which was quite sad, as there had previously been a reasonable sized population of the plants there. I did, however, though, I was quite excited to see a plant that I did actually recognise and that I do have in my very limited collection of cactuses, and I think most people have a Tephrocactus articulatus. So I was excited to see something I recognised, and it was in flower. I don't think I have ever seen one in flower in Australia. Mine has certainly never flowered, and I think it was one of the first ones I bought, and it's one of the few cactus I've kept. This wasn't the only place we saw them in habitat. There were a few other sites that we saw them. And just like here at home, I think their primary propagation method is drop a bit off and have it roll away down the hill. Because there were some places we went to where the ground was so thick with little bits of Tephrocactus that had clearly fallen off and rolled down the hill. It was difficult to find a path to walk without sort of squashing them. So we went a little bit further up the road, and our lovely driver dropped us off to hike up to the top of this hill, but we weren't going up to see this big statue. We were going sort of into some shrubland behind that to look for Gymnocalycium bodenderianum. God, why don't they make these names? See, this is why I collect succulents. The names are easier to pronounce. And so our driver dropped us off there because it had been so hot. The air conditioning in our little minibus was not working. So he went off to fix that, and he was gone for much longer than we expected. So we had all found our plants, photographed our plants, and were sitting down at the bottom of the hill melting, waiting for him to come back with our beautiful air-conditioned bus. So he did, of course, eventually come back with the air conditioning fix, which was really lovely. That's really the only day that I would have complained about the weather the whole time we were away. The rest of the time, the weather was absolutely spectacular. But then again, I am a Tasmanian and I still don't handle the heat very well. The other really great thing I find about trips is making new friends. And for those who don't know me very well, if you haven't figured out, I can talk underwater and I will literally talk to anybody. And so there were obviously quite a lot of street dogs in Argentina, and we made this little stop, and it was obviously a little picnic area. And within no time, all these street dogs turned up, and of course I had to feed them all. And I sent the photo to my mother, who was absolutely horrified because they do have rabies in Argentina. And she's like, oh my God, you're going to get rabies. And I'm like, seriously, these street dogs were better behaved than my own. They were so well mannered. They didn't try and snatch the food. They sat if you told them. And apparently that's quite common with the street dogs. So even though they're not technically owned, people do actually look after them. So if they get sick or injured or things like that, somebody in the local community will actually look after them. So even though they live on this street, they're actually really friendly, really lovely dogs. So I quite happily spent my lunch break there feeding the puppies and talking to them. It was great. And so moving on towards Tafí del Val, we had some lovely sort of scenery along the way, a little stop where we stopped and had a look, and there was some bromeliads and ripsalis growing in a tree, some nice statues, and just some sort of countryside as we travelled along our way to Taffy del Val. But you can see it's sort of getting quite late in the day. And so from Taffy del Val, we went to Cafayate. Guillermo, if he ever listens to this, is probably going to scream about how bad my pronunciation is. And then on to Salta. And so this was a stop that we made just outside of Taffy del Val. On a brick wall, just where we sort of pulled up and wandered into this local farm to have a look, there was an Echinopsis brucei growing, but that was not what we stopped to look at this spot. We stopped to have a look at this tephro cactus. I'm not going to try and pronounce that. It was putting on a massive show. It was just absolutely beautiful. We were there quite early in the morning, so there were quite a few that weren't open yet, but there were some that had opened up really nicely. And of course, you know, a lot of the places that you all also go into are farmland. Guillermo obviously has all the contacts. He pays the farmers to be able to have access to their property and hopes that also by doing that, it will discourage them from digging up the plants and selling them to people or letting people onto the property who are just going to dig them up and steal them. And so, of course, there were horses in this paddock and they were getting ready to go. And I was like, no, I've got to go and take a photo of the horses. So I was allowed to very quickly run up the hill and take a photo of the ponies before we got back on the bus and left. And for those people who are wondering why I had to take a picture of horses, I'm an equine lecturer, so I teach people about horses. And prior to getting into succulents, I used to work in and lecturing. I used to work in racing stables, so I'm a horse girl originally. But our next stop, we did stop to have a look at Echinopsis brucei, and for those who have been members since 2020 or previously, you, I hope, read my article on Echinopsis brucei and the story of the same species living on two different sides of the mountain. So this area, as you can see, is very much farmland. Wandering around here, there was cow poop and horse poop and that sort of thing. And these plants living just quite happily in that area. They do really well, of course, because the winters are quite dry. So when it's really, really cold, it's very, very dry. And then they get summer rains when it's really quite warm. So we were there in November, which is coming sort of, you know, out of spring and heading into their summer. And so as we moved on from this sort of lovely grassland, sort of wooded type country, it got drier and drier and drier as we crossed over to the other side of the mountain, and we stopped to have a look at some more Echinopsis brucei, and you can tell that they look quite different, but it is actually the exact same species. It's just that on this side of the mountain, their gene expression is turned on to grow spines to protect them from the brighter sunlight, the reflection off the rocks, and for the much drier conditions than their cousin experiences, or their sister or brother, I should say, experiences on the greener side of the mountain. So I found that quite interesting, and you'll see that variation in quite a few cacti in Argentina. If you ever get to see Guillermo's talk on Argentina, it's way better than mine, and he explains all the technical differences about why these things look so different based on growing conditions better than I ever can. But he's the one with a PhD in botany, so, you know. And so in the same area, we saw Cumulopuntia boliviana, lovely, beautiful big clumps of these. That clump there would have been easily, you know, if you'd have sat a dinner plate on it, it wouldn't have even come close to covering it. So lots of beautiful, big, mature specimens. So leaving that area, traveling on down the road, and you will see some landscape pictures in this. I'm much better at landscapes than I am of actually taking photos of plants. Like I said, you know, I primarily went to see beautiful mountains. I just love looking at mountains. I don't like climbing them. I'm too lazy to do that, but I like looking at them. And so this was our next stop. You know, again, beautiful view, lots of cactus or big cactus, and lots of what just sort of looks like shrub. But if you look closer, you can sort of start to see there's some little clumps of things. So apart from these really big cactus, and I've keep meaning to ask Guillermo, and I keep forgetting why this is like bald on the bottom, like somebody's chopped all its flesh off or something. I don't know. And they weren't all like that. It was just some of them. But lots of small, vicious, prickly looking things as well. I don't know what those ones were called. And some more vicious sort of prickly things scattered around. So you'd have these sort of areas of shrubiness, and then you wander into this sort of rocky area, and there'd be all of these vicious little prickly, you know, Tephro-cactus or cumulopuntias or Mahuanopsis, or, you know, but I like them, you know, vicious little prickly things. I just don't grow a huge number of them. And of course, some more Echinopsis brucei, which in this area, even drier still, is much more spined again. And so it is still the same species, again, just a different gene expression based on the conditions where it's growing and living. Actually, similar in sort of structure and stuff, slight variation in color. Something I have noticed, probably more on the Argentina trip than the trip I did before that. I take photos with both my phone and a camera, and that's from having been on a trip years ago where my camera actually got stolen. And so I basically lost all of my photos. And of course, with phones now, the second you're hooked up to Wi-Fi, they'll automatically save to a cloud drive. So that's why I sort of try and tend to take with both. And my camera is set up now to Bluetooth to my phone. So I've always got backups of backups. But I've noticed that if I take the same photo of the exact same plant from the exact same angle, one with a camera and one with a phone, the color of the flowers is often quite slightly different. There's probably some setting in one of them, but I'm not that technical to sort of want to figure that out. And my photos are sort of for my own pleasure and occasionally doing this sort of thing, rather than I'm not, you know, trying to publish them in a book or something. So yeah. So in the first one, in the very first sort of fields, they were a lot redder than these, whereas these sort of were more orangey coloured. Yeah, but it's definitely the same species. And so again, you know, yeah, birds, man. I don't know what their natural predator is, that they feel that they've got to build their nests out of these awful prickly trees in the middle of a really prickly tree. But it must be some kind of predator. I certainly wouldn't want to be climbing up that. We did see some plants other than Gymnocalycium, and I didn't base the talk on Gymnocalycium because that was what the plant of the month was. It just happens that the first couple of days we saw a lot of them. And so this one here is Spegazzini. And so this is one of the ones that does also, again, change depending upon habitat. Blends in quite well with these sort of large rocks. You can see here, this is a really big old specimen. It's obviously at some point had some damage to the top of it because it's put out multiple young pups, whereas here we've sort of got a younger, cleaner specimen. It's not growing in an area where it's sort of getting buried by the sand and the dust as much as some of the other ones. The other thing about this area, as you're getting closer and closer to Salta, it's a wine route. So if you are a bit of a wine drinker, Argentina makes some absolutely beautiful wines. We had quite a few nights where we'd sit down as a group and do some wine tastings of some of the local wines, which was also quite nice. I'd never tried a Malbec until I'd been to Argentina, which is a red. I've decided I quite like Malbec. So yeah, lovely area if you like wineries. I'd actually be tempted to go back and do a winery / cactus tour. And beautiful scenery. If you like geology, it's a really great place to go and have a look at geology too. Just some really amazing sort of mountain features. I'm not into geology, just like I'm not into mountain climbing. I love looking at them. I just find them really inspiring to look at these beautiful, you know, mountains. And to give you an idea of scale, that's a bus, like a big coach bus. And again, you know, and just amazing, these sort of mountains that are absolutely bare, and these valley areas that are really lush and really green because, you know, there's a small river flowing through them. And so day 5, we stayed in Salta overnight. We just spent the day traveling, you know, outside of Salta, visiting sort of various sites. And so again, in one of these valleys that's quite wet and quite moist, you can see there's sort of a lot of stuff growing on the mountainside. And so again, we're all here looking at a cliff face. And so we were looking for this lovely little plant, which again, you know, blends in quite well, and often you don't see them unless they're in flower, and then they sort of stick out. And so what we were looking for there was Rubutia pseudodiminuta. And just like the name says, there's a thumb to give you an idea of size. These guys were absolutely tiny. And you can, you know, just walking along, this is a railway cutting. So we're walking along this railway cutting, looking at these cliffs, looking for this. So without the flower, you can quite easily walk past things and not notice them. So although interestingly, some people certainly seem to have a knack for spotting them more than others do. In the same area, we saw Cleistocactus jujuensis, and again, it was growing on cliffs. So this was using my little camera on the zoom. That was about as close as I could get. A little bit further along the road, we made another stop. Lots and lots of beautiful scenes like this, just beautiful mountains, great big cactus in flower everywhere. And we stopped here to have a look at Trichocereus passicana, and we're very fortunate to spot this one, which is crested. So this was the side that you could see the crest the best from, but of course it was in the shade. And when you came around to the side that was in the sun, you couldn't really clearly see the crest. So that was, I took a whole bunch of shots, like walking around this thing, trying to get the best angle. And that was sort of about the best one I got, but you can see 2 lots of crests. We saw a bit of crested stuff in Argentina, but go to Chile if you want to see crests in habitat. Man, Copiapoa just seem to want to crest at the drop of a hat. It's like you walk into an area with a lot of Copiapoa and it's like, oh my God, crest. Oh, look, another crest. Oh, another crest over there. I was amazed by the number of crested Copiapoas I saw in Chile. And so as you get quite close to Salta, you see these beautiful different colours coming out in the mountains, and it's all due to different minerals that are being sort of expressed in different areas of the mountains. So there's certain areas where it's really, really green, other areas where it's quite white, sort of yellows and reds, and it's really, really quite beautiful. And again, the mountains that look almost totally bare, when you sort of get a lot closer to them, there's a lot of cactus and other things growing. And then these valleys, which are very sort of lush and green looking. And so we stopped here to have a look, and we also had lunch at this spot. And not long after we stopped, instead of everybody looking at the ground, everybody was suddenly looking up. And we were actually very lucky. You can see there's one there, another one there, another one there, and one way up there. And there was another one that was out of this shot, but there were 5 of them. They were condors. Sailing around on the hot air drafts. So everybody stopped looking down for cactus and stood there and looked up and watched these condors for about 15 or 20 minutes. It really was quite a spectacular sight. And at about that point in time, I was wishing I had a really big camera with one of those lenses that was about that long to be able to get a better shot of them. But with the tiny little camera that I had, I was quite pleased to at least be able to go, look, you can tell it's a bird. Yes. So, and yes, those little flecks over there, they weren't dirty marks on the lens. They were the other birds, I promise. And so in this area, we saw some more Gymnocalycium spegazzini, and you'll see these guys look very, very different to those ones that I showed you a couple of slides back. So much, much denser on their spines. I actually much prefer the look of these guys. They kind of look like some kind of crazy little sea urchin or something. And again, you know, just beautiful views with these mountains, and it gives you an idea of the altitude that we were at. You know, that's not sort of mist, that's actual cloud. So a lot of these areas that we were visiting were, you know, at about 3,000, 3,500 meters in altitude. So it also does help, you know, if you can kind of get to some of these trips, you know, particularly somewhere like this. Guillermo reckons trying to get into Cordoba a day or 2 early, because even Cordoba's at a reasonable altitude, gives you time to start adjusting to the altitude. At this height, we didn't have anybody who had problems with a bit of altitude sickness. But when we did the first crossing into Chile, which I've got a photo coming up of shortly, that was at almost 4,800 meters. And we did have a couple of people on the tour who got a bit unwell. So headaches, feeling really lightheaded, that sort of thing. So I was quite amazed for an ex-smoker who'd smoked for far too long, and I'd only been quit about, no, it was a little bit longer than that. I'd been quit for probably, I don't know, 10 or 11 months when I went on this, and I was like really worried because I was also not very fit, like a bit like I am now. Yeah, I actually coped really well. I was like, woohoo. So yeah, whereas the people who, not everyone who got a bit of altitude sickness, but a lot of those were like, you know, had never smoked and were uber fit, and I was kind of like, yeah, go me. But yeah, altitude sickness, I think, is just one of those things. You either have issues or you don't. I'm definitely not going to, if we've got any cactus people here who want to try and pronounce this one for me, I'm not even going to try. But this is another one that, depending upon where you see it in habitat, can look quite different. So really, really thick spines here, but they're sort of almost a sort of camely brown kind of colour. I've got another one to show you a little bit further on, and I'll point out for you the difference that we saw when we saw that one in habitat. And so again, just traveling along the road, very, very different scenery. But if you love geology, I just found the variation that we saw in the mountains just absolutely amazing. Again, coming back into these areas where you've got, you know, the river or the stream or the waterways running, and it's, you know, big, long, lush grass, and yet, you know, a few feet away are the mountains with just cactus on them. So heading out of Salta towards Tilcara, we got to this roundabout, and we're all like, you know, pinned to the bus window going, oh my God, we have to stop. This thing was in the middle of the roundabout. So we made the poor driver do about 3 laps around the roundabout until he could find a way to pull off, because there was traffic coming through. And we then, of course, all ran over to this roundabout to take a photo of this armadillo. I'd have really loved to seen a real live armadillo. Unfortunately, was not so fortunate, but I was quite happy with seeing this one. I thought it was so cute. And all made from recycled materials, which was even better. And so our next stop, I've sort of mentioned before about visiting people's properties. So the next spot was actually a farm. He had a number of horses there. This was a young horse that was actually tethered. And so, of course, I had to stop and take a photo of the horse. And so, you know, we sort of wandered up to the back of this guy's farm and kind of climbed a fence and went into a sort of a scrubby area that was obviously not helpful for farming, and saw some more Clystocactus jujuensis, which we were fortunate, you know, they weren't up on some cliff that you needed to zoom to get, but actually able to get up close and personal with them. There was also this other weird thing, and I forgot to ask Guillermo what that was called, so I'm sorry about that. He was, he's currently in Baja California, which is the peninsula off Mexico, doing a tour, and I was messaging him at 6:30 this morning, being totally disorganized, going, I need a name, please. And he's such a nice guy. He was obliging and helped me. And so as we were sort of leaving that area, we stopped just to have a look at this because the view is just amazing. So you can see, you know, shrubs, cactus, and then, yeah, just the cliffside and the beautiful geology, cactus up the top, you know, and lots of amazing views like that. So if you're like me and you like a bit of mountain and you like a bit of geology, you know, it really is a great place to go and have a look. And ooh, I don't know what happened then. Another beautiful stop. I also like taking photos of roads, railways, footpaths, anything like that. So I'd quite often be out, you know, squatting down in the middle of the road trying to get a photo like this with somebody yelling at me, get off the road, Melissa. I'd always look for traffic, of course, and there were definitely no trains coming, but I like to take my landscape photos. And so I'd sort of mentioned before too, that green that comes through, I believe it's from copper coming out in the soil, but just amazing and beautiful, beautiful colors. Some of the local houses and the farmers. And the other thing that I found quite interesting is you quite often have an area of farmland like this, and you'd still see cactus, large cactus growing in the middle of fields and things like that. So they didn't just, you know, bash them over or chop them down, which was really nice to see. And people with them in their gardens. So apart from, you know, bending over and looking at things, you quite often also see people laying down on the ground to get photos of things. And so here we've got Parodia thank you. Can't you tell I'm not a cactus person? And also in this same area, we saw Labivia densispina. And so quite a few good specimens of that and some in flower. And just as we were getting ready to leave, this is definitely why you want to lay on the ground. So that's Guillermo. That's a guy called Fred Dortort. He's written a book that's been published by Timber Press. I've forgotten what it's called. And this is our lovely driver who is very good friends with Guillermo. And so he's deliberately posing like that for me to take a photo. But this is what he was laying on the ground to photograph, this lovely crested Labivia densispina. But, you know, if you look down here, you know, you could easily just walk past it and not even notice that it was there. And so, of course, you know, shopping, you've got to have shopping. I think Guillermo would prefer it if we never went shopping. He also, I love shopping. I'm the epitome of tourists. I've got to come home with every possible type of souvenir that you can have. My house is full of like little knickknacks and little bits and pieces, like cupboards and shelves of them. I love it, you know. And so, yeah, there's nothing I love more than a bit of a market and shopping. And I actually bought so much in Argentina, I had to actually go to the shop and buy bags so that I could bring stuff home because it wouldn't fit into my suitcase. So it kind of became a bit of a running joke on the trip. Every time we stopped somewhere, it was like, Melissa's not allowed to buy anything. And so, of course, after a hard day of hunting for cactus and shopping, you know, you want to be able to sit down in a local cafe and have a nice cold beer. And if ever you go to Argentina, if you do like beer, I can highly recommend the locally brewed Salta. They do a few different varieties, but mine, the one that I preferred was the dark beer, Salta Negra. And if you're automatically thinking something along the line of like a stouty type Guinness, it's not like that at all. It's much smoother than that. Very, very nice to drink if you like to try a beer. So, how am I going for time? I'm running a little bit late. I need to speed it up. So outside of Tilcara, we stopped here. Again, really easy to see the big cactus. But if you look down here, you can see a few little cactus. And so here we saw Perodia massii. Unfortunately, I didn't spot any in flower. Echinopsis ferox. Ostrocylindia punta schaefferii, which was in flower, and it, even though it's a reasonable size, sticks out quite well. It was so vibrant and white up against it with those sort of pinky red flowers, just quite beautiful. Oreosirius trollii, which again was in flower. I found the flowers on these so hard to photograph. Like, I took so many photographs and so many of them it's blurry because the angles just never seem to be quite right to get good close-ups of them. So something, if I ever go back, I'll need to practice a bit more. Cumulopuntia iterbicola. Oh, yay, I got one right. I do like these guys, actually. If I was going to get into growing some cacti, I think I'd go down the some more tephra cactuses and cumulopuntias and stuff. And this magnificent beauty, just absolutely gorgeous and putting on a massive big show, Trichoserius tarigensis. Thank you for that. Go the hell away, McAfee. And so you can see this was actually quite high up. So getting this photo was really quite easy because it was just a matter of standing back and going zoom. But trying to get this, so you're kind of standing there, you know, trying to get up on your tippy toes and hold your phone and try and get it in the right spot. And of course, the second you press the button, it like moves out of shot or something. So I think I took something like 30 photos, and that was about the best of them to get that. It's like I suddenly needed to grow to like 6'6". Another place that we stopped to do souvenir shopping, and I just absolutely loved the outside of this shop. It's like, I want a set of these gates for my house, even though I don't have a Spanish mansion. I just love them and I wanted them. And then I wanted a giant size llama just because I thought it was so cool. And I didn't realize at the time that I was actually taking the photo of the giant size llama that you could see these two little llamas underneath its belly. It was so cute. And cholla wood. So the cactus wood, this is obviously not fully made out of it. It would be veneered onto it. I really wanted to buy some and bring some home, but I was just absolutely terrified about how unhappy customs would be with me trying to bring it into Australia, and then how much it would cost me to get it treated. And so I didn't end up buying any, as much as I bought lots of other stuff. I didn't buy any of that. And I was actually quite glad that I didn't, because I was doing some reading after I got home. and actually discovered that unless it's got a special brand or tag or mark on it, you're not actually allowed to take it out of Argentina. It's actually protected. And so I'd have had, even if you're buying sometimes in markets or things like that, you don't know whether what you're buying is legal, and I'd have had no idea what I should have been looking for. So something to be aware of. I had similar issues leaving Madagascar. I'd bought some shells off a couple of little girls who were selling them while we were sort of parked beside a river waiting for the ferry to take us across the river. And, you know, these little kids and, you know, trying to make whatever money they can. And so I bought these shells off them. And then I thought I was going to get arrested at the bloody airport when they found that, when they searched my suitcase. Where did you get these? You're not allowed to take these out of Madagascar. I was like, oh my God, you know, guys there with guns and stuff. So yeah, so I'm a little bit more wary now. And so I tend to do the, you know, I don't want to buy them, but here you go, take some money. So you know, particularly when it's little kids trying to sell you stuff, I'm a bit of a sucker. And so again, you know, we were there. So remember, this is a region where they have summer rains. So we were there coming out of the end of spring. So this is quite dry at that point in time. But of course, when the rains come, this will be quite a big river rather than a sort of trickling stream. And so we sort of hiked up the hill from here and saw some Gymnocalycium saglionis and some more Gymnocalycium, and just some more beautiful views of cactus and mountains. And I think I'm almost getting to the end. So yes, Tilcara to Susquez. So Susquez was the town just before that we stopped in the night before we crossed over the border into Chile. And so again, just more cliff face. And if you actually have a look, there's a cactus there, and there's a cactus there, and one there, and one up there, and some there. Oh, actually, that's one there. But these were not the cactus we were actually looking for. What we were looking for was Blossfeldia lilliputana. And these guys were absolutely tiny. Even with that one there, it would have been sort of, you know, about the size of my thumbnail. Just absolutely tiny. And so, again, just another beautiful stop, beautiful plants in flower, lovely mountain views, perfect for somebody like me. And then we had this long climb up through the Andes. It was quite a long climb. We did make a couple of stops, for some sort of scenery sightseers stops. It's not always about cactus. And this road just zigzagged backwards and forwards for what seemed like forever, climbing up through the Andes to get ready for our crossover into Chile. Are you going to go? And so at one of the stops, we saw Oreocereus trollii, some Echinopsis formosa, subspecies. Ooh, don't do that. I pressed the wrong one. I meant to press the laser pointer. Yeah, I'm not going to try and pronounce that. But again, you know, it gives you an indication of how windy that road is. And to also give you some scale, that's a car. So, you know, we're really quite high up in the mountains at this point. And this is the highest point of the crossing at Juju. At 4,170 meters. So I was like, woohoo, I've been over 4 kilometers above sea level. So something to cross off the bucket list. And as a bonus, I didn't have to climb, we drove there. Yeah. So a little bit further along the road, we made another stop, Mahuenopsis glomerata. Absolutely, I don't know what that one was, but it was just a cute little prickly thing. But I loved this guy. I really liked his sort of white spines with the dark brown tips. I thought he was like some cute, hairy, vicious hedgehog. And you remember I mentioned earlier another one where the spination changes depending upon where you are. And I sort of said it was sort of shorter and a camely coloured brown. Yeah. Well, this is its brother living on the different side of the mountain again. And so that slight change in gene expression. And so we see lot longer, thicker, denser spines, and they're white. So again, that ability to reflect a lot of heat. Exactly the same size. Sally, before you ask, flower, almost identical. Spination, the primary difference. And so, yes, I am almost at the end. I'm sorry I've gone a little bit over time. This was actually on the way from Chile back into Argentina, but I just thought I have to add this at the end. It was one of the most beautiful areas that I saw, despite the fact that the hotel where this actually was it kind of had this weird Stephen King, The Shining kind of vibe to it, even though and I'm a horror, I love a good horror movie. Even though it looked nothing like the hotel from The Shining, it was the weirdest hotel. There were these black German shepherds there that I swear, like if you looked at them sideways, were just ready to like attack you. You walked into this hotel and there were these really long corridors everywhere, and it was just like sort of vacant and empty and just kind of creepy, weird. It was, yeah. And the food was horrendous. I gave it the worst review on TripAdvisor I've ever given anywhere. But the view with this lake, and of course flamingos and some sort of wild, I don't know whether these are some sort of geese or ducks, but yeah, was quite happy to get a chance to see some flamingos and other cute little birdies. And way off in the distance over here, there was a cow. I remember that. I took a photo of the cow. So a big thank you to you all for listening. I am sorry I've gone over time, and a really big thank you to Guillermo. He really is a fantastic tour guide, and I really do have to do a big thank you to him because he basically just about named everything, because I'm not a cactus person. So if it had been me, it would have been, I like, that's a gymno, and that's a, I don't know, it's a big white cactus thing. You know, I'm really not a cactus person. So, but anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.